Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this Friday, March 20th edition of the Devils Rink Report. My name is James Nichols, Devils reporter via New Jersey Hockey Now. And guys, happy spring, right? It's the first day of spring. Today's first day? I think today's first day. First day of spring. And the weather's nice today, right? You get outside, you smell that fresh air. You get to go outside and actually touch some grass, which is nice to see for sure. So, certainly a good way to kick in the spring season. But also, you could be out there doing that. Meanwhile, you're here with me today listening to this. So I appreciate that for sure. And tonight, the Devils are in Washington taking on the Capitals for the second time this season. No changes really at morning skate. Everything looks as is. And of course it would be, right? They're on a 3-game heater, so why would they change what their lineup looks like right now? But over in Washington, the only change I think will be Jake Allen starting in goal against their Metropolitan Division rival in the Capitals. Today on the show, we will be joined by our friend Zack Phillips, host and producer of The Sheet with Jeff Marek and the Leafs Morning Take, as well as the Leafs After Dark. He does a lot over there at the Nation Network. Great network of shows over there, and just a bunch of great people who we're lucky to have befriended, and he's one of them. So he'll be joining us in a little while to talk some Maple Leafs, because there might be something there, right? We all saw the reports. We'll get into that with Zach when he gets here in a little while. But there's some interesting stuff to talk about over on that side. So we will see. But tonight the Devils take on the Washington Capitals. 3 wins in a row for them, and all of a sudden the Devils look like themselves again. And a few reasons for that, right? I mean, obviously Jack is healthy and he's going. The goaltending has gotten better. There's still some questions, right? But the goaltending has gotten better than what it was when they were just so dreadful. I mean, Jacob Markstrom had his ups and downs, mostly downs until he went to the Olympics at Milan, and he comes back and he's looking better. But that this is the Devils team that I think most of us thought that we would see the whole year, as opposed to how they're playing right now. But again, we'll get into why that might be, right? Is this the Devils that we expected, or is this maybe some fool's gold? Like, what are we thinking here? We'll talk about that for sure. But before we go any further, I'd be remiss if I don't say, hit up the chat, ask your questions. We got Zach coming in a little bit. You can ask him some questions too, Maple Leafs wise, if you'd like. And again, we got that super chat goal up. Always appreciate you guys donating, supporting local journalism. And if you haven't already, please make sure to smash that subscribe button as we trek and make our way to 1,000 subscribers. We really appreciate any of that kind of support. But standing by now is our friend Zack Phillips, and he joins me. Zach, how are you, buddy?
Good, James. Thanks for having me on here. I'm happy to see the overlays. Everything looks good. All the graphics. Good show we got going on here. So I'm excited to be here.
I appreciate that. So funny story before we get into the nitty gritty. I actually messaged Zach before I started my show and said, "Hey, I'm looking for a producer because I do this part, right? I could talk, I can speak to the game, but all that fancy stuff that you see going on that Zach just mentioned, that's all Sean. So I have nothing to do with that." And Zach gave me the advice on how to find my own kind of version of him, and that's where Sean comes in. And it's funny, Zach. So I'm talking to Sean before the show, and he's like, "Hey, who are we gonna get on today?" And I said, "We're actually gonna have Zack Phillips," and he got real excited. He's like, "Dude, no way!" And I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Dude, I love Zach." He's like, "I want to, like produce just like him." And I was like, "That's really funny that you say that." And he didn't know that I was gonna have this conversation with you now about how I reached out to you and said, "How do I find my own Zach?" And that's where Sean comes in. So I'm gonna get you guys connected at some point and just have a chat because he admires your work, much like how I have admired Jeff Marek's work, my entire life. So it's funny how that becomes, full circle.
Well, thanks, Sean. I appreciate that. I don't think there's anything to get too excited about. I just consider myself like a guy who clicks buttons and stuff. But what you've done, Sean, what you've done here, James, looks amazing, and the show is pretty awesome. So congratulations on that, and I'm happy to be here.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Don't let Jeff get in your head. You don't just click buttons. You do a lot for him. But you know why you're here. Obviously, I texted you. I said, "Hey, let's talk some Matthew Knies today," because there was reports about him possibly being, available at the trade deadline, and then obviously later we learned about the Devils' interest. But let me start here, because you're on both sides of this, right? You're a fan of the Leafs, but you talk to a lot of people in the league now, obviously, and you have that analyst side of you at this point. Why would the Maple Leafs make a guy like Matthew Knies available? That's my biggest question here, because I look at a player in him and I see somebody who has a high ceiling and could be a really good player in this league for a long time. So why is he available?
You know, I'll be honest. The answer to that is I don't know, but I'll give you a better answer than just I don't know, because that's not anything. Like the way I compared it to, or what I compared it to, was kind of the Robert Thomas situation where I asked the same question. Why are the Blues making him available? Now, I think they were a little bit more active in the trade market when it came to Robert Thomas. We saw how prominent his name was leading up to the Friday deadline. And I think that one is kind of the barometer that I put on Matthew Knies, is like, why? Why are you trading that guy? You know, Robert Thomas, 26 years old. Knies, I think 24 here now. Good contract he's just signed to. He's got term. I see him in the same ways that you've kind of just outlined. And here in Toronto, we've gone as far, especially on the Leafs Nation channel, to say future captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs. You know, the guy who could be that leader, the guy you're going to follow behind. So why the hell are you trading him? Well, I don't mind if it's just gauging the market, but at the same time, it comes back to that same question that I just keep asking, is like, what are you actually going to get? Because if you look at him and you think he's this piece that's going to be the leader of your team, the top six forward, a first line left winger, a guy who plays on the first power play, who has all the intangibles that he brings to the table, like what we've seen through the first couple of playoff series that he's been in, isn't that what you want? Like, isn't that the kind of guy that you want here? And then it kind of comes back to what the Leafs want to do. So on one hand, it would be, you know, let's make it as simple as possible, tear it down and start again. Or do they want to be competitive next season? And to, again, simplify this out even more, is like, if you want to be competitive next season, what you're getting in a Matthew Knies trade is probably not what the market is willing to offer you. You're probably looking for that stud guy to come back in here and play with these guys, who helps Matthews and Nylander right now. If it's tear this thing to the ground, then you're also probably not stopping at Matthew Knies. You're then saying, well, we've traded Knies, now we're going to trade Matthews, now we're going to trade Nylander, and we're going to bring back the young defensemen and the young prospects coming through and the picks and all that kind of stuff, because I just don't see a world that they get the guy back who helps Matthews and Nylander here right now. And if he is out there, then like, that's what you have to be doing on a Matthew Knies trade. You can't miss. Like the Mikko Rantanen thing, that was the last thing to say on it. The Mikko Rantanen thing, that was the one that was brought up last year, where it was Marner, he didn't want to do it. Carolina pivots to Knies. The Leafs don't want to do it. Well, Mikko Rantanen kind of screams to me the guy who checks all the boxes in terms of helping them. So why wasn't that trade done last year? And now all of a sudden his name's out there. So I also have a lot of questions about why he's out there.
Yeah, it's a great question. And that kind of leads me into my next one, where, obviously, again, Friedman reports the number of teams that are interested, had serious interest in Matthew Knies. So you'd imagine that meant they were getting some offers, or at least having some conversation. And, we also heard on the Devils' side that the interest in the Devils potentially moving a Simone Nemec. So let me ask you this. I mean, what in your mind, if it starts with Nemec on the Devils' end, would need to be added to that? Because you said, obviously, this is not just a trade of any, any kind of player. This is Matthew Knies. It has to be something of significant interest. Is a Nemec like enough to have that conversation, start that conversation? And if not, what has to be added there?
Yeah, I think that I don't want to overvalue the player. I watch Matthew Knies every day, and I have a personal affinity towards what he brings, and I kind of see those intangibles and have desperately wanted guys on this Maple Leafs team to have what Matthew Knies brings to the table. So I think it overinflates it in my head. So I think from a Leafs standpoint, like, Nemec is where you start, and does the package have to include more? Like, maybe, but does it go much deeper than that? The honest answer for me would be no. Like, if New Jersey's having something else into that conversation where it's just going to be some smaller piece, I could see that working out for both sides, or for the Leafs at least in that one. I don't know how comfortable the Devils get adding more onto that deal, but yeah, like I can see that working where it's pretty close to a Knies, Nemec, and then you're pretty much done at that. The reason I say not just one for one really is just because I know what he's bringing aside from just what he does statistically. And I'm terrified as a Leafs fan, as well as somebody who just covers them, of losing that piece, because you're then desperately searching for that going forward. And whatever you're going to get has to kind of equate to that or make up for the loss of that piece outside of what he just brings from on the ice point production standpoint. So that's kind of why I feel like the importance of Matthew Knies to the Maple Leafs is what makes it need to be a bigger deal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally. And I would think that the Devils' interest in a guy like Knies is for very, very similar reasons to what you're saying, why you want him to stay with Toronto. I mean, the Devils have been looking for, somebody who can play first line minutes along superstars like a Jack Hughes and a Jesper Bratt. They want somebody who's not afraid to, put a little elbow grease into it, win some puck battles at the net front or in the corners. And that's really why I say, okay, this makes sense to me how, the Devils have this interest, because I look at him in a similar vein to a guy like Brady Tkachuk, or the Tkachuk brothers in general. Like, that's the type of player that I think the Devils are really honing in on to try to, make this happen for, the top line. But focusing on what it would do for the Leafs. You could tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't know that they have a young, high-profile, high-ceiling defenseman like Nemec in their pipeline. What would acquiring a Nemec do for the Leafs? And does that mean that they're, like you alluded to earlier, like tearing it down and rebuilding, or is that like this is a retool on the fly? Like, what does it do for them?
Well, I'll ask you this question first, because then it'll help me answer mine. How close do you think he is to being an NHL player, Nemec?
I think he's there now. The thing I think about Nemec is that he has more to offer. He's just not being given that opportunity, and I'm not sure why. Because I don't know if how much of Slovakia you watched in the
Yeah.
Olympics. He was incredible, and yeah, there was a blunder or two. Those things happen though when you get the most minutes on your team, right? So I thought he has the making of a top pair defenseman. What does that do for the Leafs?
Yeah, that is huge, because the last time they've had a guy who is primed to be a top pairing defenseman, is Morgan Riley, effectively. And no disrespect to Morgan Riley, he's not a top pairing defenseman.
Right.
Especially not now. I think that throughout most of his career, if he was just pinned as a guy who was going to be a number 2 defenseman and he was going to play second fiddle to your number 1, he probably would have fared a lot better. I think the criticism of him also would have been a little bit diminished. I think he was just always viewed as, here's your number 1, here's the prize number 1, and he was never going to fit that billing. He's not good enough defensively. Offensively, at times, it can really fade out into darkness, and then you're kind of sitting there going, well, you don't play defense, so now what? And it's like, okay, well, you don't have that guy, and you haven't had that guy for a very, very long time. And I think bringing in somebody who's going to be that core piece, the guy who's going to lead with minutes every single night. He'll play 22, 23, 24 minutes, can run your power play, because that's also a big problem that they've had. Can play the late game minutes, whether it's to close out a game and you're leading or because you're down, whatever it is. That drastically changes a lot of things. The problem for me becomes, is this too much pressure to put onto the guy for one season? Let's say this deal gets done in the summer and he comes here. He's your number 1 guy next year, is effectively how you're going to have to be looking at it. Is he the guy who's going to put the defensive core on his back, carry you to where you need to go, because you're under a tight timeline? Auston Matthews has 2 years left on his deal. You want to make a decision either this summer or next summer on what you're going to do with him and what he wants to do. William Nylander's got a little bit more leeway on that one, but you're pretty much in like a year pocket. Does Nemec come here and all of a sudden next season he's really, really good and it convinces Matthews, I want to be here? Okay, that's great. But what if he doesn't? What if he comes here and he's really good, but he's not, like showing signs of like, I'm Quinn Hughes. And I know I'm giving an extreme example, but you get where I'm going with that, where it's like, I'm the number one guy. And Matthews looks at it and he's like, we still don't have defense. You're still deploying Phil Myers back there. We're not putting together a solid top six around me. I don't want to be a part of this. I could see that going sideways. So it's a positive because you don't have the number one. You know, in the Leafs organization right now, their best defensive prospect is Ben Danford, and he's really, really good. But by all accounts, everyone I've talked to, from watching him play, from being around people, he's kind of going to be like Chris Tanev. You know, in the OHL with Brantford, he just won the number one shot blocker, the number one defensive defenseman, and the number two penalty killer. He doesn't put up points. He's going to go out there and he's going to play 20-something minutes a night. He's going to block 8 shots a night, and he's going to lose all of his teeth by the time he's 23. But that's great. You want that guy, but he's not the number one. So it really drastically changes the direction in terms of here's your guy. I would love that, but I don't know if it changes, you know, I don't know if it changes the complexion of the team by next season. That's more of like a 2-3 year thing if you go out and get Nemec.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and you know, it's something that I was thinking of myself, and like, you know, look, like I think that Nemec has all the tools to do it, but he hasn't had the runway yet to be the number one guy. He has the hurdles in New Jersey that maybe he wouldn't have in Toronto. Like, is he going to play ahead of a Dougie Hamilton? Maybe not yet. Is he going to play ahead of a Luke Hughes? Probably not. But what Sheldon Keefe has been doing recently is pairing Nemec with Luke Hughes, and you see how dynamic that line looks. And again, two 22-year-olds, so mistakes are to be expected, but it's not, you know, it's not over the top, right? They play pretty well together. They complement each other pretty well. The thing I've noticed with Nemec is he has that clutch gene where, you know, we've all seen the highlights. He scores these big goals for the Devils in those big moments. And he has the ability to transition the puck well. He has the ability to quarterback a power play. It's really just a few defensive mechanics that he has to work on, like ensuring that he closes his body to the attacker and doesn't let him get behind him. But you know, that's kind of become few and far between at this point, where if he was getting the minutes like he did in the Olympics, I'm telling you, he got like 22 minutes a night there, and you were like, this guy is fantastic. He's going to be such a good player in this league. So it is interesting to me because, like you said, Morgan Riley is your number one defenseman essentially, but he's not a number one defenseman. And in my head, and I can't remember the last time they had a true number one after. Is it crazy to say Dion Phaneuf? Like, is that the last?
He wasn't even a number one. Like I brought this up, and somebody said to me, I take callers on my show, and somebody called in, and the guy was yelling, and he's like, "We haven't had a number one defenseman since Borja Salming."
Oh man!
Like, oh my god, that's a long time.
Yeah, that is a long time. That's very, very interesting. But yeah, it does make me wonder. Now, on the Knies side of this, right? Let's just say, like you said, but actually, let me put a pin in that before I do get to Knies. It does seem to me like it's a bit of a risky trade, and maybe one that the Maple Leafs would take pause on, because they would say, we want somebody maybe more solidified, who we know could be that guy in a trade for Knies, as opposed to somebody we're hoping could be. Is that probably accurate?
Well, I would say yes and no, because right now it's pretty hard to get a read on what the Maple Leafs organization does and doesn't want to do.
Okay.
I say that with all sincerity. Like, I agree with you, and I think that that's probably fair, but that's the direction we thought that they would be going in. And then you hear that they would be willing to trade a Knies, and then it's kind of like, well, now what? What are you trying to accomplish here? What is the goal of this summer and going into next season? And what are you trying to do with Auston Matthews? So yes and no. Like, I think that they would prefer to have somebody more established, but if they're flipping, going the other way, which it kind of seems like every day by the hour, something changes here with these guys and what they want to do and what they want to see. Like, we're calling up Michael Pezzetta because we want to see what Pezzetta can do, and he's healthy scratch tonight. It's like, what? What is that? What do you mean? I thought you wanted to see the guy play. We're kind of all over the place. So that does give me some pause on trying to make any judgments on what they would want to do. I mean, personally, I would love to bring in a guy like Nemec. I think that would be a great piece to kind of take like a gamble's a wrong word, but like you're taking a bit of a risk on where you don't know exactly what he'll be. Maybe not so comfortable giving up Knies myself personally, but I mean, look, if you're going to get those kinds of guys, then you got to make some moves. You got to make hockey trades, but I would be willing to do that. It's just the pressure of MLSE, the organization that owns the Maple Leafs right now, feels very confusing. And it's like they want to be in the playoffs next season, and yet we're also talking about trading guys that are going to help you get there.
It's funny, like the Devils and the Maple Leafs seem at very similar spots in their trajectory right now. Like we both don't know, and I have a feeling Tom Fitzgerald's going to be back. I'm 50-50 on Sheldon Keefe, but for the Maple Leafs, I mean, there could be some turnover there. I mean, am I wrong?
No, it does sound like it's leaning that way. I think coaching is the one that I'd pretty much I would give like a 2% chance that Craig Berube comes back at this point. I think that one is pretty much written in sand. Like that one is done. Craig Berube, I don't see surviving this summer. The Treliving one is kind of wishy-washy at this point because I think that they want to let him see this thing through and fix it. And the other thing is there's been a lot of conversations about what direction they want to go in the summer. As I kind of just mentioned, it's all over the place and everything we hear every other day changes. But there's going to be a meeting of the minds come the end of this season, and they're going to determine what they want to do with the future. I think part of that might depend on the draft lottery and where you end up placing this year. And then once that decision is made, I could see them going in a direction where they say, hey, we don't want you to be the one to reload this thing and get us into the rebuild stage or the retool stage, or no, actually, we want you to stay and we want you to fix this and we'll give you one more shot. But I think that conversation is going to come in the summer for Brad Treliving. I would just put it at like 50-50.
Yeah, I hear that, and I'm feeling the same way about how things are going for the Devils. It's very interesting to see how the parallels are between those two teams, and they could potentially hook up for a deal this summer. I got two more here for you, and then I'll let you get on with your Friday. I appreciate you coming on today. Auston Matthews, you mentioned him before. What do you think? Is he as good as gone, or what's going on here? And could it be as soon as this summer?
I've got to I'm gonna put my foot down on Russo here, and we got some tampering that's taking place. I think it's taking a page out of the Sens playbook. This might be soft tampering.
They say the same thing about Jack Hughes, by the way.
Right. I know. And these the Wild are out there. They're just saying whichever players they like, whichever one's like, oh no, they'd look great. They have a tough time in their markets. I don't know what the situation's going to be with Matthews, because 2 weeks ago, all the reports by everybody in Toronto and close to the situation was that he wants to be here. He's confirmed he wants to be a part of this. He wants to stick this out. And then he gets injured, and immediately the response that's come out of this is, well, he's going to see the direction that they're going to go in the summer. Like, okay, so something here has changed. I personally want to put a stop to the narrative that he's looking around at what happened on Thursday and saying, oh, nobody stuck up for me. I don't want to be here anymore. I think if that's the case, to be honest with you, James, I think that's bullshit. He's had enough of a track record here over the 9 years, and I'm not trying to call him out for anything. I'm just on the narrative of this. He's had enough of a track record himself of turning away and kind of not involving himself in plays when teammates have gotten into scrums or injuries or whatever, where he could have done something himself and chose not to. And he's the one wearing the C, not the other guys. So I think that's a little bit ridiculous if that's going to be the narrative. I don't think that's going to be the case, but if it is, it's kind of one of those ones where it's like, well, you know what, brother, you were a part of the culture that was facilitated here to lead to this situation happening. I don't want to give up on this guy so quickly right now. And I don't have the stats in front of me, but I can kind of just give you a general idea of what it is that I'm talking about here with this is I don't like the deployments that Craig Berube has used Auston Matthews under. Has he fallen off a little bit? Yes, he has. Did he experience this with Mitch Marner last year, which would imply a bigger sign of physical drop-off? Yes, which scares me a little bit. That being said, Craig Berube uses Auston Matthews like he is Phil Deneau, like he is a premier shutdown center, a defensive center. Auston Matthews is unbelievable in the defensive zone. In the NHL, he should not be utilized like that. I just cannot wrap my head around looking at a 69 goal scorer and starting him against the toughest matchups and in your defensive zone more often than anything else. He was ranking in the top 5 in the NHL in terms of the level of competition faced and the defensive zone starts and stuff. Like, that graphic came out about when Dickinson goes to the Oilers and everyone's like, look how tough the competition he plays is. Auston Matthews is 2 spots behind him. That shouldn't happen. He shouldn't be utilized like that. And, you know, he shut down for the rest of this season. I'm going to throw he's projected to, which really means nothing, but he's projected to score 37 goals this year. And this is a year where we're looking at the guy being like, down year for Matthews again. Well, what happens if he starts in the offensive zone 10% more than what he started in the defensive zone? What if that switches? What if he doesn't play with Max Domi and Bobby McMahon for more than half of the season? Like, those are questions I keep asking myself and wondering, do you really want to give up on this guy right now? I'd rather use this summer, try to reset some things, get the coach that can implement a different strategy, a different system, different line mates. Let's see what he's got. And then if it doesn't work in this one, okay, deadline, have the conversation, summer, have the conversation, and then make those things happen. I am scared of moving off of the guy because he's had 2 years where things have gone sideways under Craig Berube. I think that's a bad indicator of what he is as a player going forward for the rest of his career.
It's so funny. I really feel like I'm talking into a mirror about how a head coach is not utilizing his best players to their strengths. And you're much better looking than I am, so it's not actually looking into a mirror. But I mean, it's hilarious, the parallels that are happening here between the Devils and the Maple Leafs. I mean, you know, you look at how the Devils are last in the league in scoring. I mean, 2 years ago, we're talking about a team that was top 3, if not number 1 for most of that time when they were scoring upwards of, 3.5, almost 4 goals, a game. So, yeah, it's really interesting to see how just where these two teams are and how similar they are in their faults, really. But last one here for you, and it's more of a Devils related question, specifically about Jack Hughes. And you heard the comments about the golden goal. He wants it back. He thinks it's BS that it's not in his possession. But as a Canadian, where the Hockey Hall of Fame resides, what are your thoughts on the comments made by Jack here?
Yeah, I might piss people off with this. Like,
Do it. We love that around here.
I don't think he's entitled to the puck, which the context of the tone of how he said it, I think, is pretty important. We had Greg Wyshynski on, and he talked about it yesterday, and he said that Jack was being more defiant than anything. It wasn't like this, like, pissed off type of thing. It was more the quote itself comes across in a very specific way, and I understand that. And I think I would be more frustrated, and this isn't necessarily just as like a Canadian hockey fan, when maybe just a hockey fan in general. I think I would be more frustrated if it was like this I'm entitled to the puck attitude, because you want something to remember the moment by. You get to look at the gold medal, which Canada has a silver. So you have a gold medal and a million pictures of you with your broken jib and your flag and raising the fist and all that for the rest of your life, Jack. You get that forever. I just think it's... I live downtown Toronto, and I got to go to the Hockey Hall of Fame a lot as a kid, which is not something a lot of other people get to do. So I also understand the privilege I'm speaking from when I talk about this, which I can understand, and I'm not going to argue with people too much about it if they disagree on this. But going to the Hockey Hall of Fame and seeing the memorabilia and seeing the Stanley Cup and Crosby's gloves and the stick and the puck from the 2010 Winter Olympics, those things to me were the coolest things in the entire world. My sisters, they won the North American like silver stick or something like that. And the Hockey Hall of Fame was doing this thing where for a period of time they would put the winning teams of the silver stick, their names, in the Hockey Hall of Fame. So my sister's names were in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And like that to my family was so cool. They could have gotten a plaque for winning the silver stick and it gone up in our house. It would have been just some other thing that we have. But it went in the Hockey Hall of Fame. It's there for a year. It's taken out the next year, but we had to go see it, and we were taking pictures with it and stuff. So to me, I just hold the Hockey Hall of Fame with like a little bit more importance and weight. So I think it's super cool that it's in there. I completely understand. I want to make it clear. I completely understand why he's saying he wants the puck. It is a very common thing in hockey for him to be saying that he wants the puck from it, whatever. I don't know, James. You got a gold medal, man. You've got the gold medal. You got the pictures. You have the stick. You have the gloves from it. You have all of that stuff. Put that on display. You have the stick that you scored the goal with. Like, that's cooler to me than keeping the puck. I don't know. I just think it's cool that it goes into the Hockey Hall of Fame. So,
Yeah.
again, privileged perspective. I understand that. But from my perspective, no, you shouldn't have the puck.
No, I totally understand the perspective. I think it is a great perspective. And he did say, after the game 2 nights ago against the Rangers, he was like, obviously I think it's, the most honorable place for it to be, if it's not going to be in my possession, right? So he did clarify it a little bit. He didn't seem like he was super upset over it or anything. And you're right, it was, like Greg said, it's a little more defiant than it was angry. But it
The
is,
only thing I
it's
think
just
he shouldn't have said, sorry, James. The only thing I
go for
think
it.
he shouldn't have said is the bullshit line. I'm not mad
Okay.
about it, but I can understand why people are like, I think that line in particular and how he said that, when people just read the copy, that's gonna piss people off. There's already upset. Let's call it what it is. There's already upset Canadian fans who are
Yeah, yeah.
like not happy that they've lost the gold medal in 3 straight hockey events, the women's, the men's, and then the Paralympics. So we got swept in those, and then we lost to the U.S. in baseball in the quarterfinals of the World Baseball Classic. Like, we're just getting smoked by the U.S. in all of our sports. And then this American comes out, and he's like, it's bullshit that the puck is in the Hockey Hall of Fame. It's like, yo, hold on a second here. I think if he just didn't say the bullshit line, this probably is a million times smoother right now than what we've dealt with for the last couple of days.
Yeah, for sure. And listen, that's just Jack being Jack. This is the
Yeah.
way he's been. I deal with him on a regular basis. So, that's just the way he just quips like that. That's the way he could be. But I
Yep.
got one. You got what time for 1 or 2 fan comments here?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, I got one here going back to our conversation before about how I said, listen, like maybe the Maple Leafs are looking for somebody a little bit more established than a Simone Nemec in a Knies deal, right? Well, this fan here from at Meadowlander says, how about a Dougie Hamilton and a sweetener to Toronto for Knies? How does that sit with you?
uh the sweetener's got to be real, real sweet, I think, on that one. That's no disrespect to Dougie Hamilton, but like, again, it's the direction of the teams here that you're going. Knies is a significant piece to this group. Top 6 forward, probably plays on your first line left wing with Auston Matthews, plays on your first power play. You're getting Dougie Hamilton back, but older player. I don't know. Like, that sweetener's got to be real sweet. Let's put it that way. It's a no for me.
I mean, I would have to imagine it's going to be one of the Devils' top, guys in the pipeline. Like, I doubt they
Yeah.
would give up on a guy like Yegorov. I wonder about a guy like Silyev because, he's probably their second best prospect, but this blue line is pretty packed. It's pretty stacked. So they don't have to necessarily hold on to another defenseman. I mean, there's other guys too. Seamus Casey, he's a good, profile as an NHLer. I think he'll have his day where he finds it regularly in the league. But yeah, I Dougie Hamilton, you're right. I mean, for that in that kind of a deal, I do ultimately think at some point Hamilton gets moved, but for a Nyes, I'm not optimistic here. And last one here for you. We have it from World's Worst Gamer. I'm not sure if this is an inside joke, but he says Zach coming out with his own smelling salts product soon. What's that about?
On the Leafs Nation After Dark, I started doing this a while ago when I was doing my own channel. I think somebody
Okay.
sent a super chat or a comment or something and was like, have you ever done smelling salts? And I said, no, I haven't done smelling salts. And so I ended up buying some off Amazon to try. I said, I'll do it the next show if I can get them. And I found them. So I bought the
Okay.
smelling salts. And then people were like, do it again, do it again, do it again. And so we set this thing up where every 50 likes I get on the show, I'll do smelling salts. And we've had playoff shows that they've done really well here now where we've hit like 500, 550, 600 likes on these things. And I'm just doing smelling
Wow.
salts like every 15 minutes on the show, basically. So I have a bottle of smelling salts that sits on my desk the entire time. We've tried to work on sponsors and everything, but it's so far unsuccessful. But yeah, smelling salts is the thing that I've done, and it's the scariest thing, James, is when you open a new bottle and forget that it's a new bottle,
Oh
and
yeah.
then you're trying to talk through it while you're just crying on
No.
camera for like 15
Yeah.
minutes straight. Yeah, it's tough.
Oh, that's tough. Tough stuff. I've done it myself, on the bench or wherever it is that I've done it, and yeah, it's tough when you first open that bottle. But Zach, you're the best. I appreciate you coming on the show. This was great, and I'm gonna get you and Sean connected at some point over the weekend.
Yeah, sounds good. Hey, I appreciate you having me on. Everything, this was fun. Everything looks great here on the show as well. So kudos to you and Sean for the show. Much success to you guys, and I'd be happy to come on anytime. Thank you.
Appreciate it, pal. We'll talk soon.
Sounds good. See ya.
Zach Phillips, everybody, there he goes, producer and host of the Leafs Morning Take, Leafs After Dark, the Jeff Marek show, or sorry, the Sheet with Jeff Marek. I mean, he does everything over at the Nation Network. Those guys are great network of shows over there, and we're lucky to call them friends. But that was Zack Phillips, and if you don't know him and you don't follow him on Twitter, just go to my Twitter handle and see my latest tweets. You can find him there. He's a great follow if you want to keep up with what's going on in the Mecca, Toronto. I mean, a lot of stuff happening there, and it really is interesting, right? You look at the Devils, you look at the Maple Leafs, and they're in such a similar cross paths in their organization and their trajectory. What are the Maple Leafs going to do? They're probably a little further down the road, and like, should they just tear it all down and start over again? Because they've been through plenty more gruesome years of trying to grind out Auston Matthews and William Nylander and that core, and obviously Mitch Marner's not there now, and they've started to kind of subtract from their core to see if they can change things. John Tavares is there too, right? And they can't break through. And this year is another year where you look at the team and you're like, oh man, that's you expect more out of them from that, but you do the same thing when you look at the Devils in their roster. And you're like, man, you really expected more of these guys, and you're just not getting it. So, yeah, that was Zack Phillips. He's great, and we enjoy having him, and we're gonna definitely have him on again sometime in the future. All right, let's just get to some notes here, and then we're gonna get over to the chat questions. So if you have questions, comments, concerns, anything Devils that you want to talk about, let me know. Throw them in the chat. We'll have a good Q&A going here. Just because again, we're getting to that portion of the show where we take your comments. So you fuel the show at this point. Let's get it going. But just wanted to quickly touch on, these are notes from the great producer Sean. And he's absolutely right when he says Jack Hughes, like James Dolan, is the owner of the New York Rangers. And if you want to know what he means by that, he's provided this great graphic from Wikipedia where somebody has changed the owners section to Jack Hughes being one of those many owners of the New York Rangers. And look, the reason why they have done this is obviously a joke. He doesn't own any stake in the New York Rangers, but his numbers, which are just unbelievable against the Rangers. He loves playing them. Career regular season, 20 goals, 15 assists for 35 points in 25 games, 1.4 points per game. Other teams he dominates similarly are the Montreal Canadiens, 7 goals and 14 assists in 13 games. Vancouver Canucks, 8 goals, 8 assists in 9 games, assuming that he, did like to play his brother over there. Maybe that'll be, a wild statistic soon. And the Buffalo Sabres, 9 goals and 11 assists in 20 games. And then since returning from the Olympics, I mean, look, Jack Hughes has been on fire. 6 goals, 12 assists in 11 games, and he looks fantastic. And that's part of the reason why the Devils are playing so well the way they are right now. I mean, they're they have a healthy superstar again, and that's something that they couldn't have said for themselves before, obviously, the Olympic break. And leading up to it, the couple of months that he tried to, I think it was, I should say, month and a half that he tried to, get healthy again. Only recently has he said his hand has started to feel great again. It was not feeling as good as obviously it was before he had that, horrific injury. So, as a result of Jack's play, the Devils are 7-4 since returning from the Olympics. And you look at, is it a fluke, or is this, the Devils that we expected? You know, yes, you expected this from the Devils all season. However, let me just say this, right? Yes, Jack Hughes is back, and you look at how they were playing before he got hurt that first time, right? They were 12-4-1 through their first 17 games, right? Then Jack gets hurt, comes back. He's never really the same until recently. Now he's his full self again, it seems. And, again, they're 7-4. They look great. So what is it? Were the Devils always this team and they just lost Jack? Or are they not this team and they have to still go into this summer considering, like, what are we, how do we be better this year than we were last? And look, you have to consider the competition, right? The last couple of games they played were against the St. Louis Blues, not making the playoffs, the Toronto Maple Leafs, not making the playoffs, the Florida Panthers, not making the playoffs, the Rangers twice, not making the playoffs, the Los Angeles Kings might be making the playoffs, but really don't look promising. They have losses against the legit teams, which are the Buffalo Sabres, who it's crazy to me, but they're so much of a wagon that, obviously they weren't playing well to start the season, but they're playing so well now that some people are saying, oh, I wouldn't be surprised to see them make the Stanley Cup. I guess. I mean, you have to get to the dance first and you have to see what they're like there, because it's been 14 years since they've been a playoff team. And now we're talking about them as Stanley Cup contenders, which, look, I'm not saying they're not, but, like, let's see what they do in the first round first. Um, but regardless, the Devils could not beat the wagon that is the Buffalo Sabres. And then the Pittsburgh Penguins, which they were without Sidney Crosby, and that was a really, in my opinion, winnable game. I think they should have taken those 2 points, which would have put like an inkling of hope on their season. Did not do it. And then the Detroit Red Wings, obviously, they lost to as well. All playoff bound teams. Obviously, Detroit is still, fighting for it. They want to get there. I think Pittsburgh is pretty safe, but they're not a guarantee. They're not a slam dunk. But those teams certainly right now are in playoff position, and we do expect them to be there. So, we will see, obviously, how the rest of the season goes for the Devils. They have the Washington Capitals tonight, not a playoff team, fully healthy. Pierre-Luc Dubois is back. Ovechkin's still doing his thing. They got Cole Hudson now in the lineup, who I don't know if you guys saw his first game highlights or even watched the Capitals, but he looked, you might as well just have called him Lane. He looks so good. I mean, I don't know if they expected him to be that good, but he certainly does look very strong. And so we'll see. We'll see. But, again, the fact is that the Devils have been playing better lately, yes, because of Jack Hughes. But there are some players to highlight here too. I mean, Jack's been adamant that he needed Connor Brown on his line. Well, look what he did the other night. He had a 3-point night, goal and 2 assists. And it's one of those things where it took a couple of games, but Connor Brown is a guy who has always, and he's doing it now with the Devils, played with high profile guys. Toronto, he did it. Edmonton, he did it. And now in New Jersey, he's doing it. So, that's the thing with him, is that, Jack sees the way he plays. He's a responsible two-way guy, burns with speed. I think that's probably the thing that had him the most excited about putting Connor Brown on the top line, is that he's so fast. But he could score. Obviously, you see what he's doing right now. He's got a couple of goals in the last few games, and him, Jesper Bratt and Jack Hughes are really gelling, and it's really good to see. I don't think that that's something that the Devils are going to look at and say, okay, we've solved our first line issues. I don't think that's the case. I think that ideally you still have Connor Brown in that third line mix. I think he still has really good chemistry and plays very well with Cody Glass. And that's the thing that you want is, depth scoring, right? The reason why you want Connor Brown on the third line is not because he can't hack it on the first line, but he is making the kind of money to play third line, and it is a good depth, scoring piece to have in addition to your top guys. So, Brown's been great, 12 points in 11 games, 7 primary assists. I mean, he's killing it. It's been good to see for Connor Brown, and he's been, so good in the post games too, speaking about why he thinks the Devils are playing the way that they're playing, and when they're not playing well, against that the Pittsburgh Penguins. He was very, he came right out and he's like, "Look, that's a disappointing one for us. Like we could have had those 2 points and we didn't. We need to be better." And he's very, very well spoken. He knows how to address the media and address the room, honestly, as a professional. He's done it already. He did it very early in the season. You remember, those reports that Connor Brown was one of the guys early in the year when the Devils were first starting to go through their struggles to stand up in the room and say, like, "Guys, we got to be better. Like, we got to, put our nose to the grind and really get out here and doing this." Again, first year addition to this team, and at this point, there's only 15, 16 games left, so he's probably a lot more comfortable than he was. But I mean, he was comfortable enough at the beginning of the year to say, "Hey, we got to be better, and this is how." And you'd love to see that from a veteran guy like Brown. So by all accounts, Connor Brown's been excellent. One of I know there's a lot of disparity on Tom Fitzgerald's tenure and what he's done. Signing Connor Brown was one of the better things that he's done for this team. So kudos to him, and kudos to Brown for playing as well as he is. Another guy, Paul Cotter. I mean, this guy is one-on-one with a goaltender, lights out. He's the Wayne Gretzky of the shootouts. So he's the Wayne Gretzky of breakaways. It's crazy. He doesn't miss. He's automatic. And I asked Sheldon Keefe about this. He had the 6 seconds left in overtime a couple nights ago, and he had that move on oh God, what game was that? I can't even remember. There were so many games this week that they all blend together. But um, he's 6 seconds left in overtime. He's got the breakaway. Sheldon Keefe said he didn't even watch. He just walked off. He knew. He was like, "It's automatic." We were laughing as coaches, he says, because it's not even a question anymore. He just doesn't miss. And he's just filthy on the breakaway. He's filthy when it's one-on-one with the goaltender. And again, as a guy who I've gotten to know a little bit in the locker room and stuff like that, another just genuinely really nice guy. And the thing about Cotter is he's so hard on himself. He'll say, he'll sit in his stall and I'll say, "Hey, great goal." He'd be like, "Yeah, finally." Took like 13 games. I'm like, "Hey, man, like, take the compliment." He's so hard on himself because he cares so much. That one of these days I tell him, I'm like, "Your brain and your hands are going to sync up and you're gonna have like a 30-goal season." And he laughs and he's like, "Yeah, we'll see." He says something silly the other day, like, "I took a big hit in the second period, probably made me forget what I was gonna do on my move that ultimately ended up seeing him score that goal anyway." But funny note here from Sean, who says, "Is he the new age Jacob Josephson?" I called him Jakob. Like, there's so many J names that I start turning into Y's lately. I don't know. Maybe I got hit in the head too. But Jacob Josephson, like, is he the new age Jacob Josephson? That's a really, really good comparison. um, but one of the things about Cotter is, obviously he's getting hot at the right time, right? The reason I say that is because he's going into this summer as a restricted free agent. Is he a guy that you bring back? I think you do. He's got still a lot to prove. There's no doubt that he's going to be that grinding bottom six guy who is going to make it harder for the other team to skate against, right? He hits a ton. He's a grinder. He's a guy that you bring back at a reasonable price. I could see him getting a 2-year deal, like almost like the Nathan Bastian deal a couple years ago, 2 years at like $1 million a piece, maybe 2 million a piece because the cap's going up, the cost for inflation. But yeah, I could see him coming back, and Sean thinks maybe a 13th forward. I don't know. I think I like him as a 12. I think he's could be a good regular everyday 12. And look, if he ends up being a 13th forward, that's pretty much a luxury. So, yeah, I think ultimately I could see Cotter being back. I think there's plenty of reason to bring him back. He's got all the tools there, and I would love to see him take that step and really solidifying his game. Another couple guys to note that are just helping the Devils chug along here in a big way. Nico, 10 points in 11 games. Nico Heischer's been great. And again, one of those guys who obviously you expect it from. I know there's this crazy narrative out there that he shouldn't be the captain and wear the C. I don't know where those are coming from. Obviously, I love what Jack is saying lately, and aside from some of the controversial takes like the golden goal stuff, but there is a lot to be said about how he's holding himself up as a player since he's returned from Milan, and just holding the room accountable and stuff like that. I do get it. But I also understand the optics of it's not even just the optics. I understand how the room looks at Nico. I understand that Nico is vocal when he needs to be in the locker room. And there are a lot of captains too in the NHL who are leaders by example, leaders by what they do, and that's part of it. Nico is a very regimented guy. He is first to obviously stand up for his teammates, but also, he is first to be in the gym. He's, last one out, stuff like that. Like, he's very regimented, and a lot of the players say like they look up to him for a reason. Even the veteran guys who come into the room, like when Brendan Dillon first signed with the Devils that first year, he was like, I can't believe how much I look up to Nico Hischier, who he's, by the way, like 8 years older than. So it's just funny. Like, Nico has this way about him that he does command the attention in the room because of how he is with his teammates, and how he holds himself up. And I don't think there should be any question about him being the captain. um and he's, again, like I said, another guy who does it by showing, and the way he has been on the ice, not just on the score sheet, 10 points in 11 games, but in the other two zones as well. I mean, he's lights out. So there are 31 teams that would love to have Nico Hischier, and if you're a fan of that 32nd team who doesn't want Nico Hischier, I'd urge you to reconsider, because it would it would be a detrimental loss to this organization. And lastly, Dougie. Dougie's been, before the break, he was great, and after, he's been great too. 9 points in 11 games. So he's doing well, which is interesting because not only is he doing well, but so is Luke. He looks really good. So is Simone Nemec. He looks really strong. And them as a pairing, I really like when Keefe does that. It's a fun pair to watch. So I think that, there's a lot of things happening. Like, it's interesting. We're in a time now where we know that the Devils are not going to make the playoffs, right? But these are the things that you want to see the Devils do going into next season, because you want to know at least you have the tools and the foundation, right? And it's not like a fool's gold thing. There's more nuance to it. Yes, I think the Devils have an easy schedule, and that's part of the reason why they're playing so successfully. But I also think that they're leaning into their strengths a little bit more, and a lot of these players who were underperforming are now performing to standard lately. So I think that it's a good base to sit there and say to yourself, okay, this team is a good team. We just need to make the right additions to this team in order for them to take the next step. What those additions are, we'll see this summer. Could it be a Matthew Knies? I think that would be a fantastic addition, and it is very interesting to me to hear from a Toronto Maple Leafs perspective on how close the Devils would be if it starts with Nemec. Because, I mean, look, like, let's just say it's Nemec and a first for Knies. I mean, it's probably going to be a little bit more. Let's say it's Nemec and a first, and let's call it um who was that second round pick that the Devils had last year? I'm trying to remember. I haven't looked at the Devils prospects lately, and I probably should. Um, but I think it's Conrad Fonderk. I think he was their second round pick last year. Let's just call it that, right? Nemitz, Fonderk, and a first for Nyes. Like, I think I'm doing that, and that's a trade I could understand the Devils parting ways with a Nemitz for, right? Then you don't have to worry about moving Hamilton, because Nemitz is going to command top dollar this summer, I think. I mean, he's going to at least try to, right? We'll see where they settle. It wouldn't be surprised if it starts at, a Luke Hughes like number, but falls somewhere between 7 and 8 million bucks. Even if it's like a 3 year, 4 year bridge deal to his next contract. So yeah, let's just call it, like a Samu Salmonin, right? He's another guy who I like in the Devil's pipeline, who has a lot of skill. And a first with Nemitz going to Toronto for a guy like Nines. Like, yeah, I think you do that. I think that's a good, certainly a good trade that the Devils would come away with a guy that they seriously they need a guy like Nines. I think he would be an excellent addition. So we will see. Good to see the team at their full potential. Otherwise, it's not bad per se in the sense, like I said, you want to know that you have this foundation. Like, are they going to be contenders for a McKenna or a Stenberg? Probably not, but they could likely add a quality forward if they're going to keep that first round pick. That they'll see in a few years. and replenish that forward depth because they really don't have one. Um, Okay, so some comments earlier in the day, maybe yesterday, by Emily Kaplan. She reported the Devils could be hiring someone above Fitzgerald. I did see those comments. I don't necessarily know how to take them. I'd have to hear them because I just read them. But let's, just dissect the report for a minute. Like she says that she can see them doing that, not necessarily saying they're considering it. She could just see that happening. Um, who would be some possible options? I mean, you look at guys who are, and don't get me started on a Lou Lamoriello thing. I don't think that that would happen. I think that he's enjoying his, semi-retirement. I think he still has like some sort of advisory role with the New York Islanders anyway. Um, but this would be like a senior guy. This screams Brendan Shanahan to me. I don't know if that would happen. Maybe Doug Armstrong. Could the Devils bring in a guy like Doug Armstrong to advise, kind of like how he's doing now for Alexander Steen? I think the plan for Doug Armstrong is to take a step back from managing. He did it with Hockey Canada. He's going to do it with the Blues. Steen's going to take over there. I think the plan for Doug Armstrong is to kind of take a step back. And I'm not saying this is going to happen, but if the Devils could offer him, maybe a little bit more than what the Blues are, and say like, look, like we'll give you this if you do this for us, maybe it's something that they could do. Maybe that's a guy that could advise Fitzgerald and help him, navigate how to fix this roster. We'll see. Um, but I don't think it would be someone like a John Chaika or a Sonny Meta. Like I think those are candidates for a new GM that would be coming in. So, um, all right. So let's, Sean, move on to the chat questions. We got a few here, then we're going to wrap it up and call it a weekend. And we'll be back next week with another great show, another great guest, maybe two. Who knows? Maybe we'll do a double guest show next week. See where we can get going. But let's get to some questions here, Sean. Let's load up the first one from Meadowlander, who says, where is the cap money coming from to bring Knies here? Nemec for Knies doesn't solve the salary problem with all of our no movement clauses. So if you look at how much money the Devils are going to have next summer, as soon as July 1, I think it's a pretty significant amount. I think I'm just going to load up cap wages here. Um, don't remember exact. They have in cap space this summer. I just have to find it. Cap wages kind of changed their website. Let's do Puckpedia cap projections. So this summer, they're gonna have space 12,175,000. And no, that doesn't solve the issues for the Devils needing cap space, but then they're not going to have to pay Nemec after that, right? So you'd have to consider like how much of that is going to be eaten up by Knies, who I think makes like $7.75 million. So there's the difference there, right? And he makes that for the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seasons. So you're good there, and the cap's going to continue to go up. After that, like the Devils only really have a few other notable names, not even that many notable names actually to extend, right? It's Grisiuk, they're going to do that for sure. But then it's Cotter, after that, I mean, I don't know that they're going to bring back a Cholowski. They'd be sitting pretty with, a 7 points. I think they would take that, by the way, all day. A 7.75 million for a Knies. Absolutely. I don't think they're thinking twice about that. So they'll have plenty of room this summer to make that happen. And then they wouldn't have to pay Nemec. They would just have to worry about Grisiuk and Paul Cotter. If they choose to do Cotter, they're definitely going to be doing Nemec. I mean, Grisiuk, but we'll see if they end up, trading Nemec for a guy like Knies or not. Thank you for the question, Meadowlander. Let's move on to the next one, Sean. World's Worst Gamer says, I can't discuss anything about the future of the Devils until we know who our GM is going to be at the draft. Listen, I'm not reporting this. I'm not saying that this is going to happen. I'm just saying from my hunch, in addition to a couple of conversations I've had with a few folks around the league, I would not be surprised to see Tom Fitzgerald back. It just wouldn't surprise me. And the whole Kaplan report where maybe somebody comes in as an advisor to him, I could see that, but I just don't like nothing about what's happened in the past few weeks since the deadline, what happened at the deadline. Nothing to me screams that he feels like he's on the hot seat. He feels like he's got pressure, and he feels like he has to do something now, which would have been a couple weeks ago at the deadline, in order to save his job. What I did get was the sense that he was being patient, not because he didn't have the green light to make a trade, but in the sense that he thought that there was going to be more available to him in the summer to do. I had one conversation with somebody who had said that he maybe had laid some groundwork on what's going to happen in the summer. So again, that says to me, I don't know that he's going to be going anywhere. We'll see. And look, it could be a Don Sweeney situation. It could be if you don't do this year and put us back to where we want to be, you're out. Obviously, Sweeney has the Bruins playing pretty well right now, and they're competing for a spot in the playoffs and kind of look like they might make it. We'll see what happens, but ultimately, I think that we're going to get at least one more year of Fitzgerald. I could be wrong, but that's where what I think based on what I've heard from him, what I've heard from some other people, and we'll see what happens. Anything can happen after that last game of the season. So, thank you for the question, World's Worst Gamer. Let's move on to the next one. At JMB3248 says, watch the Maple Leafs fire Berube, then first, then hire Sheldon Keefe, but then hire Berube in a second. I would be shocked. I think that at that point, the Devils probably know they're too similar, cut from the same cloth. And like I said before, like this is me talking. Others have to see it too. The parallels and similarities on what's happening in Toronto and New Jersey are starkly similar. It's so shockingly the same, and you have to just understand that these are coaches who aren't going to lean into the strengths of you know the Devils, who are a speed skill rush team, and likely the same thing could be said about Toronto. So I would be shocked. I would look at maybe some other options. I don't know about a first year guy. It could be a first year guy, but I would probably look around the league and say, who else is available that has that mentality to lean into those strengths of the Devils as a speed rush team. I would look in that direction. Thank you for the question. Let's move on to the next one. Back to World's Worst Gamer, who says, this will be the only time Jack Hughes will be in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Buck off, Jack. Interesting comments. We'll see. I mean, look, man, when Jack Hughes is playing the way he does, or the way he has recently, he's an all-world player. Like, I see a guy in Jack Hughes that when he's healthy and playing Jack Hughes hockey, top five in the league. No question, top five in the league. If he could stay healthy, he'd be one of the best players. He's going to be the best player in Devils franchise history, hands down. He's already the fastest to 400 ever, 400 points ever. And I don't have any question that he's going to be the best in Devils history. That being the case means that I think that he could, with the right supporting cast, be a Stanley Cup champion. And that would ultimately put him in the Hockey Hall of Fame no matter what. And look, again, fastest to 400. He's only 24. He could hit 1,000. No, I have no question he could hit 1,000. Even if he played 60 games a year, I could see him hitting 1,000 points. So, we'll see. But yeah, I could see him in the Hockey Hall of Fame. I don't think that this will be the last accolade for him in the hall. Thank you for the question. Let's go to the next one. Meadowlander says, as Jack matures, he will learn not to trigger the Canadian media who are looking for anything to soothe that tremendous loss in Milan. I do think that Jack has learned a lot. I do think that he is growing up before our eyes. There are going to be some hiccups. There are going to be, there's going to be classic Jack Hughes moments. It's to be expected. And look, again, the comments sounded a lot worse than they were. At the same time, it wasn't a good quote. Like, he shouldn't have said it's BS. He probably should have said, like, like, I get it. And he did come back and say, like, there's a reason why it goes to the Hall of Fame. It's like the most precious place of for something to be. But again, there's going to be some hiccups. This is classic Jack Hughes. Like this is who he is. But he is showing signs of maturity. I will say that. Like I have thoroughly enjoyed speaking with him, whereas before, it's not that I didn't enjoy it. It's just that I kind of knew going into those conversations that like, all right, we he, we have to pull something out of him for us to talk to us. Like you see it, you see all the video and stuff like that. How he doesn't, he didn't necessarily love doing it before. Now he's been a lot better, and credit to him. Like he came back and he learned a lot. And again, hiccups for sure, but he has gotten a lot better to his credit. Thank you for the question. Let's go to the next one. I think there's two more here. World's Worst Gamer says, I wanted more from Cotter considering what we gave up. It's interesting. Like Holtz, whatever. Akira Schmid, like giving him up was okay to me, and like I understand. Um, like it looks bad, but he's playing behind a really, really good Vegas defense. Like they're one of the better defenses in the league. So he's been really good. I've talked to a couple of Vegas reporters and guys who watched him play out there, where they're like, look, yes, he's making the saves he has to make, but the Vegas Golden Knights keep a lot of the shots to the perimeter. So it's not like he's facing these crazy high danger chances. It's not like his goal save above expected is like tops of the league. So like if we pull up Money Puck right now and we go to goalies, like where does Akira Schmid fall? I'm already scrolling down to the 30s and he hasn't shown up yet. Yeah, Schmid is 43rd in the league with 0.3 saves above expected. So he's not lighting it up over there. He's just doing his job. Could you say that's more than what he's Markstrom is providing for the Devils? No, I don't think so, because like if Akira Schmid was in net for New Jersey, certainly the Devils would still be giving up 3-4 goals a game, because like the defense has not been great. Like it's been a little bit leaky. And so I don't think Schmid was like the savior. I think that Jacob Markstrom still is a better goaltender than him, albeit Jacob Markstrom needs to be better. The other night he showed against the Rangers, really, really bad rebound control. It was not good. He needs to be better, but I don't think Akira Schmid was going to change anything for the Devils. So getting Paul Cotter, I think was fine. I think that's a fine trade. I would make that trade again, probably. Thank you for the question. And let's do our last one. And then Sean, we'll call it a Friday. Let's have a great weekend here. Got a couple games on the slate for the rest of the league, but for the Devils, we get to have a nice weekend off, and we'll be back next week. So, Toronto would want Mercer in a deal. I would assume that you're talking about for Nemec, and that would be interesting, right? I would probably still do Nemec, Mercer, and something, right? I don't know if it has to be a first round pick at that point. That seems like a lot, but I'll say this: like Nemec is a guy who, Mercer's a guy who I really like. He is responsible in all three zones. He's still young. He has that motor. He wins puck battles. The thing for me is that in that first season where he scored 27 goals and 60 points, at this point, that's an outlier because he hasn't been able to replicate that. I think he's going to be probably a career 20 goal, 40-point guy. Is he a top six fixture? I'm not sure. I think he probably should be playing bottom 6 minutes if that's going to be his ceiling. Um, Still room to grow. He could be that 30 goal, 60-point guy. As soon as next year, he'll be 25. Maybe he gets there. I just haven't seen it from him. And I do like one of the things is like you trade him and then, all of a sudden like he's scoring 30 goals with another team and you're complaining about that. But would he have done that in New Jersey? Like, I don't know, because he plays on a line with, Timo Meier, who commands the puck. And when Timo Meier is not commanding the puck, he gives it to, for the most part, Nico Hischier, who's transitioning the puck. Like Dawson Mercer's doing the work of going to dig the puck out of the corner and win the puck battle and settle down the offense in the offensive zone to try to get the cycle going. He's not really, commanding the shifts. He's not really, controlling the play. And that's ultimately why I think he hasn't, blossomed into that 30 goal scorer that you see. He's also not playing the role he did when he was a 30 goal scorer or almost 30 goal scorer, where everything he scored was at the front of the net. He was just burying rebounds, garbage goals. He's not doing that now. I'm not sure why he's lost that touch, but ultimately I think that, a trade for Nemec and Mercer plus a sweetener. Again, I don't know if it has to be a first, but even if it does have to be a first, that first round pick's not going to help you. It's not going to be McKenna. It's not going to be Stenberg at this point. That first round pick's not going to help you for 3 years. Trade that pick for Matthew Knies. Just do it. Matthew Knies had some injuries this year. He was almost almost a 30 goal scorer last year. I think he scored 29. He had injuries this year, still met his point production from last year. He's actually going to pass it. And I think that he is going to be a regular 30 goal scorer in this league. Matthew Knies is exactly what the Devils need. And if you're trading Mercer and Nemec to get him, listen, I think that's fine. You trade Mercer, you trade Nemec, you go get Knies, and then you fill in the gaps through free agency, however you have to do it. You have Gritsik, who is playing excellent. You have Haminaho, who is playing excellent. Like, you have guys who can fill that void. Get Nemec to Toronto for Knies, and I think you're talking. You're cooking there with something. That's like the only kind of trade I would move Nemec for. Like, if it's not going to bring in a guy like Matthew Knies, don't move Nemec. If it's not going to bring in a guy like Brady Tkachuk, don't move Nemec. I don't know at this point if Quinn Hughes is possible, but if that's a different kind of deal that we're talking about, don't move Simone Nemec unless it's for somebody of that echelon. And that's my spiel. With that, we're going to end the episode today. Thank you so much for subscribing to the Devil's Rink Report. If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button down below. Thank you for joining us today on this first day of spring edition of the Devil's Rink Report. My name is James Nichols, New Jersey Devils beat reporter via New Jersey Hockey Now. Thank you to Zack Phillips for joining us today. Thank you to producer Sean for doing his thing as always. And until next week, we'll talk then.